All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a pretty radical philosophy, one that totally challenges how we think about personal freedom, law, and even government itself. We're going to break down the core ideas, pulling them straight from the source. And this quote right here, this is pretty much the foundation for this entire worldview. The idea isn't that freedom is something someone gives you. Nope, it's something you have to actively take. And that one shift in perspective, well, it changes absolutely everything. So, to really get what's behind that statement, we've got to look at this core conflict that the philosophy sets up. It's basically a choice between two states of mind. Are you being governed by others, or are you governing yourself? These are presented as two totally different ways of moving through the world. Okay, so first up, let's talk about what this philosophy calls the sovereign mindset. And look, this isn't just about, having a more positive attitude. It's pitched as a complete internal revolution, a fundamental shift in how you see yourself in relation to any kind of authority. So according to the source material, your entire relationship with authority really boils down to this choice. On one side, you have the slave mentality, which is described as just passively accepting the rules that are handed down to you. But on the other side, you have the sovereign mindset, and that's all about proactively creating and using your own law, your own paperwork to push back against the government's claims. Okay, so how do you actually make that shift from one mindset to the other? Well, this philosophy argues it all starts with language. The core idea here is if you want to change your world, you first have to change the words you use to describe it. And you have to pay really close attention to where those words originally came from. Let's take the word freedom, for example. Most of us think of it as a right, something granted to us by a government or a constitution, right? But in this philosophy, it's totally redefined. It's seen as a contraction of free dominion, which means you have absolute inherent authority over your own life. You are the ultimate lawgiver in your own world. And that naturally leads to this really critical question. Where does authority actually come from? This philosophy says, hey, it doesn't come from the government. Instead, true authority is said to come from the self. You are, quite literally, the author of your own law. You are the only source of your own authority. Okay, now this next point, this is pretty much the linchpin of the entire philosophy. It draws this really sharp line between what's lawful and what's legal. Lawful is based on universal principles, right and wrong. But legal, in this view, is purely about commerce and contracts. The really radical claim here is that the entire modern court system has nothing to do with justice or law, and everything to do with enforcing commercial agreements. So, if the whole system is built on contracts, you've got to be asking, how on earth do I end up in them? Well, this philosophy argues it happens through what it calls the language of control. These are everyday words that are framed as little contractual traps you fall into without ever realizing it. So, this philosophy points to certain words as being these legal traps. Take the word resident, for instance. When you call yourself a resident, you're not just saying where you live. The claim is you're actually accepting a legal title, and with it, all the contractual duties that bind you to the state's jurisdiction. And you do it without even knowing. Here's another one, register. The source material breaks this down to its Latin root, reges, which means of the king. So from this perspective, when you register your car, you're not just getting a license plate. You are, in their view, literally handing over your claim, your authority over that car to the state, which they see as the modern-day king. And this brings us to a really important distinction they make about power. The argument goes like this. A government can't unlawfully force you to do something against your will. However, it can legally enforce things on you. But, and this is the key, only based on contracts that, they argue, you've been tricked into accepting. So, okay, if this whole worldview is based on hidden contracts and tricky language, how do you actually push back? This is where we move from the big ideas, the philosophy, to the practical tools that people who follow this stuff suggest using. Let's say you get a bill or a fine in the mail. The source material says the real issue isn't whether you broke some rule or even if you can afford to pay it. From this point of view, the only thing that matters is this. Where does the obligation to pay even come from in the first place? And the main tool they describe is basically a form of Socratic questioning. The whole idea is to stop arguing about the facts of the case. Instead, you challenge the very foundation of the claim. You ask simple, direct questions like, who am I in this matter? can you please show me the original contract I signed? And where exactly is my obligation to pay this written down? And that right there is the key to the whole strategy. According to this philosophy, the system's power over you isn't really based on brute force. It's based on your silent assumption and acceptance that you're obligated to go along with it. So where is all this heading? What's the end game? Well, the final piece of this philosophy explains that the goal isn't to fight the system or try to change it from within. The ultimate goal is something else entirely. It's to make it irrelevant. From this perspective, doing things like voting or protesting is actually the wrong move. It's seen as playing their game, on their board by their rules, which, in this view, just ends up legitimizing the system's authority over you. The point isn't to win the game, it's to get up and walk away from the table altogether. And this quote from the source really gets to the heart of why they believe you have to walk away. It presents this pretty wild idea that your legal name, the one on your driver's license, your birth certificate, it's not actually yours. The claim is that it's property of the state or a corporation, and by using that name, you're basically acting as their agent, and you've given up your natural authority. So the end goal here isn't about tearing down the system we have now, it's about making it obsolete by building something new right alongside it. The vision is to create this parallel network of sovereign individuals who deal with each other, trade, and cooperate based on their own laws and their own agreements, which would just make the official system totally irrelevant to their lives. So after digging into all of this really unique philosophy, it seems to boil everything down to one simple but pretty profound question you have to ask yourself. Where does your authority come from? Is it something that's granted to you by some external system, or is it something that's already yours, just waiting for you to claim it?